very much for the invitation to share with you some of our projects. Um, and I will start my presentation by, since the topic is urban development and some always reference that I have in art. I always like some of the Chirico paintings, which they always introduce in a surrealistic approach the idea of the city with the reference to historic city. But what I try to understand through these paintings is that you can find the idea of the passageway, the idea of the square, the idea of an event in these paintings. And this is what I'm keeping from these reference in a way. I will introduce today with you 5 of our projects. It's very interesting, which it's the first time I'm hearing Eraclis, but 3 of the projects that we are presenting today are related to student halls, which is our office has been doing many projects in this direction. But the idea and the topic of urban development for us is like we're looking to that in a reverse way. What I mean by that, as architects, we mainly design buildings. So what we are trying, and very seldom we are involving in urban design. So what we are trying in these developments, we are trying to introduce the idea of urbanity, the idea of the passageway, the idea of the square, the idea of event, and how we can see into the buildings with a typology involving the meaning of urbanity. So the first project that I'm introducing is Electricity Authority of Cyprus headquarters in Paphos, a city in the west of the island, that it was designed in 2002 and completed after 10 years. And this building, the reason I'm showing this building is the idea of the linear volume that is spanning 120 meters on the ground floor is relieved and is giving access to people, introducing the idea of the urbanity in this project. So having said this, you can see from the plans that the bigger or a very big percentage of the ground level is given to a square, to public access, even if this is a headquarter with no gates, free access to everyone in order to visit and relate and give this space back to the city. And this is the ground level, and here you can see the linear volume of the offices spanning above, creating the classic idea of pilotis, leaving the ground free to use for the people. And this, as you go below that, the landscape is also incorporating this idea, allowing new perception of space and new relations of anyone who can be part of this visit. And this is the idea how the building, you see it from the lobby, looking outside to the garden. And going back to student halls, my first important project, I would say, this project was done with Papachristou, an architect here that I'm cooperating from time to time in Cyprus. It was my first major project back in 1998. I was just 26 years old, 2 years after finishing my studies. and it was a competition as the previous one. And the idea of that, it was again to dismantle the big volume that we had in order to accommodate 208 rooms for students, and give the idea of a continuous walkway where these buildings were linked, and the idea of creating different perceptions from different levels as you walk around the building. So it's the idea of the street, the idea of the square in the center, where in the center there is a common space for bigger events where people, students mainly, can meet each other, and the idea of social interaction is being like a major idea for this building. And these are some images from different levels where someone can understand the interesting perception of spaces you have from the different levels which are created through these walkways. So as I said before, the idea of urban, street, square versus the buildings. Again, this is a private project that we designed in 2010, and it was completed after 4 years in 2014. Again, a student hall, but this time not in a big area, which usually public universities have as the previous one, but this was a private development that next to a university, they wanted to create some student halls. So you understand that here the parameters are much more different. There is a lot of, we have here 300 students placed in, I would say, 15 times smaller plot of land from the previous one. So you understand that the geometries need to be different, and the proximities are different. So what we did in this case, in order to again give the idea of the city, the urban, and these buildings can be part of the urban fabric of the building. On the one out of the two buildings, we created this L shape, let's say delta shape building, where in that we had, so we have, I'm going back to, so we have 4 typical inline rooms for the project. As I said, 300 rooms, and below the shell of the building, we created this space, which is a communal space, an extension of the pavement of the street in part of the covered piazza, let's say, of the building, where the stairs are connected and they take you all the way up. They're connecting the 6 levels of the building, and they're creating the idea of one seeing each other, people meeting. Also, the corridors are a little bit wider, so you have some space to chat and talk with your friends. And again, the major idea was to create this communal space where the fabric of the city can be part of that and explore and be part of the private space. And these are images from that covered piazza, let's say, of the student halls. As I'm proceeding, again with a team of 2 other colleagues, with Christos and Anastasios Kotsiopoulos, we won a competition for the Public University of Cyprus, which was the Faculty of Engineering in the University of Cyprus, the public one. This project is next to the student halls. So after 12, 13 years, we won this competition. And again, you have a huge building, 35,000 square meters building, where because of its scale, you have the possibility to create, I would say, an urban development by deconstructing the mass of the building into smaller volume, creating qualities that you can find usually in urban projects rather than in, I would say, usually maybe typical faculties of in universities. So for us, because of the big mass of the building, we created a connecting element to connect the main pedestrian way of the university. The University of Cyprus is a campus development. So it's somewhere in the fields, in the outskirts of Nicosia. So the idea is they have a master plan on a campus. So the idea was to connect the pedestrian way with the road below. So the idea was to take into account even the elevation and create an experience of space, creating a pathway which has on its way access to the three faculties that we have here, which are the electrical engineers, mechanical, and structural engineers. So the idea is although you have these Cartesian linear volumes where you place most of the classrooms and also many other spaces, the idea was to create something exploded, something interesting, to create this idea of connection. So this is as you go from the pedestrian ways and you find in front of you the idea of the climo, which is this idea, a shell that it creates shadows. Again, the idea of the square, but as we are here in Cyprus, the idea of shadow, especially in summer days, is very important. So the idea of this structure is, as we call it, climo. It's coming from the two words of climate modifier, so we call it climo, which is the connecting element of all of the buildings, and is connecting the pedestrian way with a ramp all the way down to the main street of the university. So these are some images where every faculty, the three faculties, engineer of electrical, mechanical, and civil engineer, they have this linear volume symbolizing their existence. And under the idea of this climo, this square, we have two ways of exploring the idea of the square and also the idea of a green courtyard. So on the upper level, you have a stone square, very solid, white, where there is this cut that is connecting to the lower level where we have a planted roof where green is introduced there, and there is this relation with the seating areas. So the idea here, since the scale is allowing that, the scale of the project, so you have not only the idea of the walkway, the street, and the piazza, the plaza, but you introduce the idea of the garden in the middle of the building in a way. So these are some relations with some of the topographical elements, since the area is a little bit inclined. Some image of the project. And this is as it is last week. The project is under construction. So you see here the relation of the building of the student halls that we did some years ago with the same team. and the idea of connecting the pedestrian way through this piazza and green area, going all the way to the main street of the university. This project has also some engineering involved. We have a 21-meter cantilever, which is structured on base isolators. And you can see that we find this, that is the idea of a building that introduces a typology of urbanity in a, let's say, natural environment, in quotes, or I would say a campus. And the final project, going back again to the student halls, is a competition that our office won 2-3 months ago, which are the student halls for the Cyprus University of Technology. This is in Limassol. And the interesting thing is that you have a typical neighborhood of Limassol with 2, 3, 4 building stories buildings. And then there was an empty space which was given to the university there. So the interesting thing, it was that this project, was the first project in the area for the university, is on the line connecting the urban environment versus the natural environment. So what we would like to introduce here again is the connectivity with the city, but also when you go to the scale of the student hall project, you find the qualities that you will find, and the typology of the building is made in a way to get urban feelings and not only building. The idea was based on urban references, the idea of walkway spaces which we can find events, amphitheaters, meeting points, and also introduce the idea, of course, of the student life. So as I was saying before, you have here the city in a way, and from the other side, you have the natural environment, which is the new development. And we wanted to create, to bring and connect the two of them, urban fabric with the natural environment as it stands from today. So we have most of its volume as, of course, since it's related to the south area, to the south, which is the best way to look the apartments of the students. And on the other side, we created a connection to the rest of the development that will come, the new university, by introducing the idea of squares and meeting points. But what we did here, we, instead of creating spaces for communal independent volumes where you have your restaurants, you have your entertainment space, seating areas, and so on, we create this inclination where we deliver the public space below that, and we left the volumes of the student halls, the rooms above that. So what we did, we introduced a public element on the ground level, and also we enlarged that area by doing this inclination and deliver it back to the people. But that was done as a topographical reference, so you can even walk on this inclined element, and you can go directly through the stairs to your room. So what was the major idea? It was we could then introduce and enlarge the feeling and the idea of social space on a vertical element, which is these stairs, which are connecting only public spaces, that is small kitchens for the students, and the idea of verandas. So when you go up to your room, you meet your friends, there are veranda spaces, you sit, And it's the idea of a vertical square, which we also introduce some greenery to bring the natural environment on these volumes. So there is an axis which introduces us the public spaces, which with these triangular cuts, we insert light in the building, where you have either the gym, either the coffee area, either the lobby. And from these cuts, you introduce light, but also there is a linear planted area alongside. So when you walk in that passageway, you have simultaneously the feeling of being part of the green plantation, and also on the other hand side, you have spaces, you have light, and there is this inclined space, which above you is a public space. And on the side where is the south side back to the city, the building is more rigid, is more block, in order to give the scale back and reflect the scale back of the city. Where when you are on the piazza, you can have these spaces, and you can have views towards the open space, and on the inside area, these are the students' apartments and rooms. So this was a section indicating the idea of what can happen in relation to the section, the client element, piazza. So here you can see this is a vertical public space, which is like an extension of the horizontal going inclined and then going vertical. So this is the idea of that. And looking to the south, where you have more private space, which are the rooms. And finally, we hope that this project will give the opportunity to the students to become part of their social life. This space can have this urban feeling, and also bring people from the city to this new environment. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Eraclis. Thank you for this excellent presentation and those interesting projects. But can I just ask you a couple of questions before we move on? How much does art influence your architecture? Because you mentioned art at the beginning, but do you use references of art into your everyday practicing?
We are doing it a lot. For example, even if in many projects, especially for even the last one project with the stairs, which the stair is an image very architectural made. My relations with the free design, how we introduce them and not make them completely repeating elements. The idea was related from Anthony Caro table sculptures that you usually have. He introduces in sculptures, Anthony Caro, metals that you put them on the surface and then they go down. So this is one of the reference. Also, I didn't mention it in the same project, when we wanted to make a column and we didn't want it to have this structural impact on the building, the reference was very precise, and it was clearly mentioned in the competition that it was the boxes by the American artist, I miss now the name, the minimalist artist, which is doing the color thing with QR geometry, Donald Judd. So these references are always in our mind when we're designing projects. We believe that these references are interesting to live in a way, we cannot always do that, architecture a little bit in quotes on the side.
Okay, thank you. And can I just also mention that it's very obvious in your projects that you create the feeling and the sense and the functionality of social interaction. And you mentioned it several times. Did I notice that in your last project, the one for the back for the university, the latest one, these vertical social spaces, let's say, is it maybe a reinterpretation of the vernacular traditional Mediterranean typologies of social interaction in villages or in smaller towns?
I would say that the reference, if you can say in relation to Cyprus, you can say that the smaller volumes, I would maybe suggest that feeling. But in Cyprus, we never had 5-6 floors buildings, especially.
No, I'm not talking about
the idea of the stair connecting a yard to the upper floor. I think this reference exists with the idea of green. We always had some greenery in these internal courtyards.
Actually, I meant the reinterpretation of horizontal social spaces into a vertical one, because it's very relevant to the Mediterranean cities and villages, that smaller spaces for the people to interact. And
I would say, Christos, that we try the last years to introduce more and more in the building the idea of bringing and allowing people to go into private spaces, or where so in order to expand the urban fabric. So this is for us very important. You cannot do this in every building. I mean, there are buildings, because of the function, because of the brief, they are private, they need to be completely isolated. But when you have a project, have the possibility of allowing access, or the scale of the project can give you the opportunity to give more access even to the habitants of the buildings, or even for people that they can visit it and gain this experience, we believe this is very important to introduce it in these type of projects.